Hi guys, it's Misty from the Book Rat, and today we're going to take a look at 5 comics I have read recently. There is also a supplemental blog post to go along with this in which I discuss 5 more recent comic reads, so I will leave that linked below as well as all of the books in case you want to find out more about them or pick them up for yourself. But I'm going to get straight into my thoughts. So, got my notes. This is kind of a lot, actually a lot more than 5, crammed into one video because the first that I want to talk about is actually the first 11 volumes of Fables. I decided to just talk about them as a whole because I feel like I have the same thing to say about all of them. So this is thoughts on 14 recent reads, but you know, whatever. So as a unit, the first 11 volumes of Fables, and the reason I'm choosing to do the first 11, even though I'm further than that, is because that kind of comprises the first major story arc. I have to say, I'm liking way more than I thought I would. Now, when I first started getting back into comics, I read them as a kid, but it had been a good long while since I had read any. One of the most recommended to me was Fables because I'm such a fairy tale buff, and I didn't like it. I don't even think I made it all the way through the first one. There was something in the tone, it's kind of noir-ish, especially in that first volume, that just, I don't know, felt forced, I guess, to me, and chaotic. Something about it, I remember it feeling very chaotic. I don't know if it was the art, I think it maybe was, but that might have just been because I wasn't kind of used to sort of visual storytelling again, because now that I've gone back into it, it doesn't really bother me. I actually like the art most of the time, so it might have just been a situation of wrong book at the wrong time, but I remember pretty adamantly not liking it and not wanting, like, I intended to continue because so many people had recommended it, but it was like the better part of a decade before I actually did. So now that I've kind of come back around to it, I'm flying through it. That's pretty much all my Hoopla account is made up of these days. It's just Fables and audiobooks. And I'm glad of that, because I have come around. There are definitely things that I love about it. I think it has some really high highs. I also think that it has some pretty low lows. So for me, it has a great handle on characters and also the balance of sort of good and evil and I guess kind of cosmic irony where things are going right, things seem great, and then something's going to blindside you out of nowhere. Or the opposite, things can seem, you know, all hope is lost and then something's going to come through in a pinch and save the day. It does have a pretty good balance of that, and I enjoy that. I also, for the most part, really do like the twist on the idea of the Fables and how their stories have become our stories, and that's something that gets explored more once you get beyond that first arc, but I'm not going to touch on that. You know, I think it does have some real strengths. That said, though, there are times that it just really rubs me the wrong way. I feel like there's a tendency in Bill Willingham's storytelling to, what I can only imagine is insert himself, because these things kind of come out of nowhere that seem like author inserts, seem like he wants to say something specifically and that it just is being forced into the character's mouth, and I don't like that. I also think that it can tend to be a little, I guess, abrasive, and I hesitate to say that it, you know, kind of crosses lines as far as, like, I don't know, pretty much anything that I say could really get me attacked by people who are, like, assholes, but there are times that it just seems like it's intentionally button-pushing in a way that's not for story growth and it's not for reader growth, but just in a kind of ornery way that gets on my nerves. I think that the start, at least, of, I think it was volume 7, the Arabian Fables, when they came into play, almost seemed borderline racist, I gotta say. Like, it was really kind of out there. It has leveled off for the most part. It's gotten better, but it was like a lot of shouting of, like, jihad and infidels and just, like, the most cheesy, over-the-top, like, low-hanging fruit. Oh, it has a tendency to kind of go there, and when it does, it really falls flat for me. But when it doesn't, it's really strong. So I can be a little torn, but for the most part, I really do enjoy it, and I think it's getting stronger. I'm curious to see where it's going now that that first arc is kind of overcome. I don't know that I love right now where it's going. I think it's going into, like, a really cheesy villain territory. I guess we'll see. As for the art, there are a lot of guest artists in this series, which is understandable because when something is popular and long-running, a lot of people want to get in on it. I get that. And having rotating artists can be a great way to discover new people and new styles, but it also can mean that you get some really shitty art, or you get, you know, the characters that you're used to being drawn by someone else and you don't recognize them as the characters that you are used to, and you're like trying to figure out who they are. So again, that can be hit or miss. I have discovered some new artists that I absolutely love their work. I've also discovered some that were pretty crappy. So that's Fables 1 through 11. Up next is Saga Volume 8, and I'm not going to say too much about this because, again, it's Volume 8. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but I will say I pretty much go into every volume of the series now expecting to be heartbroken, just waiting for the moment that they're going to just rip my heart out. And it's becoming a really interesting reading experience as a result. Like, I'm going in so, like, on edge and hesitant that even when nothing's happening, I'm like, I know it's coming. That, I think, speaks very highly of it, because if something can get you that emotionally invested, obviously it's doing something right. The art is always beautiful. The character work is always beautiful. There's just, I'm never gonna not love these, I think. I shouldn't say that. It's tempting fate. It could pull a Rat Queens on me, but for now, everything I've read is just, oh, I love it. That said, I felt like Volume 8 was maybe a little lacking in something. I can't quite put my finger on it. It did feel a little bit different than the other volumes, but I mean, still something that I totally love. I still adore these characters. I still can't wait to get my hands on the next one. It's probably my favorite series running. It's just so good. Then we have the Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. This is something that I've already technically reviewed, so I will leave the written blog post and a look at one of my favorite panels. I'll leave that linked below. I still wanted to include it for those of you who hadn't seen it or who missed that blog post, and just because it's so cute and I really like it. So, I mean, the art is very simple but effective and sweet. It just feels very charming, and it has a really, really great handle on sort of conveying character emotion and conveying progress. So those are two things that are highly prized by me when it comes to comics. I really love when an illustrator can make you completely not just understand but feel, relate to what's going on with a character or in a scene purely based on the art. No words needed. I really like when an illustrator can just get everything across and let the art stand on its own, and I think that Jen did a great job of that. I think the emotions that she conveys on the characters' faces, even though they are so simple and not kind of overdrawn, you can see what they're thinking and what they're feeling, and I really, really love that. And I think she does a really great job at having these sort of progressive panels where it's like seeing things from different angles as it goes, or seeing, you know, the smaller part of a scene and then it widening out. Like, she gives you a really great sense of, I guess, kind of motion and the relation between panels and how they kind of build on each other, and those are both huge strong points for me. I really, really enjoyed that. Beyond that, storytelling wise, it feels very current, it feels very of the moment. It deals with some kind of gender issues and non-binary issues, just, I guess, identity and sense of self and being yourself, embracing who you are. So I think it's going to connect to a lot of people. Beyond that, it's just very, very sweet and charming and has a great streak of humor throughout it and some surprising bits. Like, things happen that kind of you don't see coming in such a really great way. So pretty much across the board, thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it will appeal to a lot of people and is wholesome enough for just about everybody without being like saccharine the way wholesome books can be. So just across the board, really enjoyed it. Moving from one of the moment comic to another, I also read Moonstruck by Grace Ellis and Shay Beagle. I might have flip-flopped those names. This one too feels like it's very, very current, but in a slightly less successful way compared to The Prince and the Dressmaker. It deals with a lot of issues of like inclusivity and, again, being yourself, being the most you. All of the characters are something, like they're all a thing. Every character is either going to be gay or lesbian or non-binary or trans, or just there's something about each of them, and then they are also all some kind of magical creature. And because of that, it's probably going to maybe draw in a lot of people who are looking for themselves in something that don't get the representation, and on that end it's great. But at the same time, it almost can feel a little exploitative, and I'm not sure how else to say it. It just kind of feels like there was a list, like there was a quota that they felt they had to meet. And I don't think that is the case, but just the way it kind of comes across can feel that way. It can feel like it is, I don't know, because I don't want to make it sound like it's a money grab or something like that, but it does sometimes feel a little forced, I guess, and it shouldn't. And I'm not saying that a story that has all of these different sort of characters under its umbrella is forced, because I don't think that's the case. I think you could certainly write a story where every character is something that's not, you know, mainstream or sort of normative in any way, and have it be completely natural. I guess this just feels slightly forced. Forced is the only way I can really think to say it. It just, something felt a little off, I guess. It could be because it is the beginning of the story, so maybe it just hasn't found its footing. And for all that, I mean, I did like it, I did enjoy the characters, but there still just was something that was kind of holding me back from loving it in the character creation and in the plot creation. It felt a little thin on plot and a little heavy-handed, I guess, on character. Aside from that, the palette, the art is absolutely dreamy. It is just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful palettes and artwork. Very kind of bubbly and feminine, so it's going to definitely draw in some of those readers, you know, kind of different from what's out there. And I think the sort of world creation is also really lovely. So those are kind of its strengths. Its palette and its world, definite strengths, but the plot and kind of the feel, the tone of it were a little lacking for me. That said, I do want to read more. I want to see where it goes and see, you know, kind of if it gets stronger. So it's still one kind of in my watch pile, but didn't quite live up to what I was hoping from it. And the last one for this pile is One Day a Dot by Ian Lendler. This is illustrated by Shelley Paroline and Braden Lamb. And it tells, in a very, very simplistic way, the story of the Big Bang, which is quite the undertaking for a little tiny kids comic. The art is very colorful, very simplistic, and cartoony, as it just kind of progresses from one thing to the next. Again, I kind of have positives and negatives because I think it's a little too simplistic, and maybe the topic is just too much for such a very simple, very trim book. But I think it's maybe a good starting point for a conversation. It's a good kind of companion if you're wanting to talk to a kid or an adult who has no idea about, you know, the Big Bang Theory and the idea of evolution. This could be a really great kind of aid to that, but on its own, I don't think it's going to quite get you there, even as a kid. I think simple is good, but overly simple, even when you're dealing with works for kids, just, it doesn't quite hit the mark. But that said, it was still, again, just very charming, and I think for what it is definitely what it is intended to be. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, I think they achieved what they were going for. They conveyed everything in the way that they meant to, and I think they meant it to be as simple and as pure, I guess, as it turned out. I just don't think it will be what people are necessarily expecting to get from it. Still totally worth it. I think still a great addition to a kid's bookshelves, and probably great for like science classrooms and things like that. And I think it's so sweet and cutesy that a lot of kids will just love it and, you know, embellish it with their imaginations the way you do when you're a kid, when you have something that's super simple but that you get attached to. I think it will kind of fill that role. But I mean, it's a lot to take on the story of you, the universe, and everything. That's a lot. That said, still really enjoyed it. So there you have it. That's my thoughts on 5 recent comics, or 14 recent comics that I have read. For the most part, enjoyed them all. There were drawbacks to a few of them, but most of them are recommended wholeheartedly, and some of them are recommended without reservations, but none of them are ones that I would totally skip, unless they kind of hit on pet peeves or the art just isn't for you. As I said, they will all be linked in the info box below, as well as a post where I talk about 5 more books, so if you want to see my thoughts on The Witch Boy, Rat Queens Volume 4, Street Angel, Giant Days, and Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which are all very different, and I have some things to say about them, that will be linked, and you can find that in the description box. If you have any comics that you recommend for me, I would love to hear about them because, as I said, I've pretty much only been reading Fables, and I don't want to burn myself out on it, so I probably need to take a break with something else pretty soon. So let me know those in the comment section, and if you've read any of these, I would love to know your thoughts on them. But that is all for now. As always, thanks for watching, and happy reading!